Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Season 2, Episode 6 of the Commerce Corner podcast by Lula Commerce. Today, we've got a really exciting guest lined up for you. We're joined by Peter Rasmussen here on the podcast today. He's the founder and CEO of Convenience and Energy Advisors. He's been involved with some of the leading brands in the space like Sheetz, Wawa, and Neon Marketplace. So, Peter, welcome. We're honored to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me today, Matt. Happy to be here.
Of course. And I'm joined in the virtual studio today with Adit Gupta, the co-founder and CEO of Lula Commerce, who will be kicking us off with questions. So go ahead, Adit, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Thrilled to be here. It's going to be such an exciting conversation. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Peter, you've worked at building some of the most iconic brands in the C-store space in the US. Your decisions have touched millions of consumers. And I want to start with how you got here. What was your first interaction with retail building in this space? And how did you decide that this is where you wanted to spend your career?
Absolutely. Well, so, born as a little kid, I thought, I want to be a part of gas stations, right? It's like a dream you have as a child. No, but seriously, you wonder, like, well, how do you get into something? I grew up with very humble beginnings, didn't have a lot. And in 2000, when I was 16, they were building a Sheetz in my town. And I applied. They were paying well above rate, which was $7.25 an hour at the time. And I really liked it. And, I was a shift supervisor in high school and assistant manager, then a manager in college. And I switched over to Wawa. And when I finished up school, as friends of mine were going off into different positions, I was a store manager and doing really well. And I thought I really liked this. So that led to leading a district and then being a part of Wawa's opening in the Florida market, which went from 0 to 220 stores from 2012 to 2020. And then, after 17 years with Wawa, got the bug to do something different and be a part of a startup, and started Neon Marketplace, working with a private equity group. And then about 3 years ago, started Convenience and Energy Advisors, which really focuses on serving the convenience store and the downstream energy market, not just with advising, but being a part of marketing and loyalty services. So it's been a couple decades now, and I'm thankful. It's the industry I know and the industry I love.
I love that. It sounds like a lot of your experiences have been around building really good hospitality experiences, that food destinations for shoppers. And in fact, for Neon, it was set to be a food destination that also sells fuel. And I want to double click on that experience. What did you learn from building Neon? What worked, what didn't work? And what were some takeaways that you took out of that you're sort of continuing to apply these days working with emerging brands?
Sure. So a lot of learnings from Neon, and I think I probably learned more in those couple years than I did many other. And Neon, for its purpose, was a success story. So Neon was a private equity-backed venture that had the goal to sell in 5 years and then retain real estate for ongoing value to its investors from there. And it did exactly that, especially in a, call it, challenging real estate environment like New England. And in creating the brand, the idea was, well, we've got a 5-year run on this. We need to develop a destination, a food brand, something with a differentiator, but then ultimately designed in a way that it can absorb into another chain at some point in time. So that was a story of Neon. And from a learnings perspective, I think it's challenging in operating a smaller chain. When you're operating a larger chain with a couple hundred stores, you could make a mistake on a site or two, and that's no big deal. But when you got a smaller chain, you're dealing with thinner margins, bigger challenges, and you got to fire correctly the first time in every single case. So it's definitely smaller chains face some unique challenges that can be absorbed into a larger chain.
Those are some good learnings that can only come from experience. The one thing that perked my ears was with a goal to sell within 5 years, incredibly intentional. And I haven't seen that much intentionality with new emerging brands. Do you feel like that's the case? A lot of new brands are, what are the buckets of brands being built? Or are some winging it, or others like super intentional on the financial outcome of what they're hoping to do? Or is there something you're observing here with just emerging brands being built?
Well, I think on that it's a matter of, well, what's shared in the public markets based on what the goal is versus what the actual goal is, right? So some of the best operating chains today across the country, that's what they do. They operate, some are in the business of real estate, some aren't because they don't want to hold it and they want to just keep opening stores and opening stores. And some others, whether it be on the acquisition side of things or building new, I mean, you just got to look at what's the money source behind it, and then ultimately, what's the end goal for it. So I think some are. It's just a matter of, well, you don't just go out and put that out there that we're started this, we want to build it, but we want to dump it in 5 years.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And yeah, I think food is central to so many new brands. I think of the last 25 brands I've spoken to in the last few weeks, everyone is focused on a differentiated food offering because that's the better margin profile, but also from a brand differentiator, like that you can kind of control your destiny. I know a brand in Pennsylvania actually that's had a incredible dairy product experience for 50 plus years, and that sort of fizzled away. But they're bringing it back. They're making it part of their identity, and which is different than what you see most convenience store chains do. I think that the other part of for Neon food destination that sells fuel is constrained right now. Strategic reserves are depleting, although that there's some improvement with the situation with the Strait of Hormuz. For someone in our industry, how should they be thinking about this entire scenario? How's it affecting us today? How is it going to affect us short term, midterm, long term?
Sure. No, great question. Obviously, at least at the time of this recording, there's a ceasefire. But if I were a betting man, I mean, the barrel of oil isn't going to go back to high 50s, low 60s in the short future at all. What we've seen historically with demand for traditional gasoline, petrol, is demand destruction does not start in the aggregate across the US until you reach that $5 a gallon mark. Once you hit that, then you start to see reduction in trips. Diesel is a little bit different. So diesel's accelerated faster than gasoline in recent times. And then the cost of that just quantifies on everything because almost everything delivers in a truck, right? So I think that's the scarier story. But say we do get to a point where gasoline's at $5, and yeah, it's certainly there in California in some markets, but that's where convenience stores, frankly, still have the advantage because you need to fuel. And if you're positioned, just as you talked about the importance of food service, if you're positioned where you have a competitive offer, well, now you're more compelling than a QSR. And food service comes into that so much. I was on a store tour in the South this past week, and if you look at convenience stores that don't have any sort of food offer that's differentiated today, it's almost potentially a slow death. It's not going to just stop tomorrow, but year after year, your combustible cigarettes are going down. But okay, you're replacing that with vape and OTP. That's a higher margin, higher retail, but it's less purchases because it lasts longer than a pack of cigarettes. So how does that model grow over the years unless you just have some big windfalls from fuel margin or natural population growth in a segment, things of that magnitude. But I think you need food service and or some other kind of differentiator or you just can't see growth, and then that protects you as well, given the volatility in fuel prices.
So, Peter, so much to unpack there. What you're advising to maybe smaller customers may be different than bigger customers. When a customer is like a chain of 3 stores versus 10 versus 500, you have so many different optionality based on your scale. And you're like, no one wants to go through this slow death experience if you have one store. You want to be in a power position. So if you were to give differentiated feedback to different segments in the market, what would your take be? Like if you're talking to a set of 10,000 independent stores that are saying, Peter, what do we do here? How do we prevent the slow death? What would you tell them versus the emerging brands, the 10 to 50s that have more optionality? What would you tell them?
Well, I would take the size of the chain off of it, and I would say, what's the offer and the potential by site? So if I have a C store that's literally just selling packaged goods and gas, and it doesn't have any food service, depending on how well the store is operated, the location of the store, competition, could be great, could be perfect to company op, and that'll work for a duration of time. It'll work for a long time if there's a natural growing population and a competitor doesn't come in. But when you have stores where, okay, I don't have food service and my performance is average, I have better competitors coming in across the street, now I get to the point where if I don't do something different, like dynamically add food service, make the business better, and I'm company opping the store, then you get to that point where it's more profitable for you as the owner to dealer the site. Because if you get to the point where you can make more on rent and just take the fuel margin than operating it and all the complexities, well now you have a dealer model out of it. That's not necessarily a bad thing at all. It's just it's a choice and strategy. So I think I look at it from that standpoint of, I'm conscious of the economics of dealer versus company op, and you could even throw franchising in the middle of that depending on what tools you have. So if you get to that point where you're company opping and it's more profitable to dealer, then at that point, then either dealer it or make a difference and build that site and that brand up if that capability is there for that site or market.
I think that's a really well articulated response. Do you feel like most brands are thinking this way, or from your experience, how are brands actually operationally thinking about this?
Totally varies, right? So I think some brands are very good at company ops, and if they have a site that is failing, they'll deal with it or they'll close it. You have others that are pretty dynamic and operate both models. And then you have some that are very heavily dealer focused. And in that sense, they're more of a real estate company if you think about it. And then in that case, they don't want to deal with the complexities of company ops. Or if in the profile you're weighted heavily one way versus the other, then you might not be good at the latter. So if you have 500 sites, but 20 of them are company ops, like you might be good at it, but how much of your resources are you going to put into 20 versus the delta of 480? And
if you're an independent operator and you want to introduce some differentiated food service, how do you do that? What's your optionality today? Just high level, so we can plant a seed of how this even works operationally.
Well, in many ways, you could say that you have a better, easier, for lack of better words, opportunity than a larger operator, because you can be nimble. You're doing it. You have a site. You don't have a group of people to get aligned on it. So from that point, you then you can bring in a known brand, and there's some value in that. You get the brand recognition. You have processes right away, but of course you're taking a lower margin. Or you could develop your own and promote it and build upon it. So it all depends on, what efforts you want to put in, and what makes sense for that site.
Yeah, that's a good distinction between bringing in a known brand versus your own. I think from my recent conversations, a lot of folks do think that they have to build their own, which is not necessarily the case. There's a higher chance of failure there. I think that just from an execution standpoint, versus a pre-built program that you can implement. Just continuing on this line of profitability and how tech impacts it. As you know, the theme of this season is tech roadmaps, and how do you align the tech roadmap to a greater P&L outcome? Um, how does loyalty fit into all of this? I know that loyalty is something that every brand is talking about, but it's a big cost, especially when you don't have a loyalty program. So, how should a brand be thinking about loyalty in 2026, and how should a brand be thinking about ROI on the loyalty program in 2026?
That's a great question. A loyalty program can be extremely expensive. And I think a lot of the conversations around it tend to steer more towards the app or some of the other, sexy digital aspects of it. But a loyalty program at its core is a commerce engine that can print money for you, and everything is measurable. So I'll give you an example. You want people to join your program. How do they get in, and what's the motivation to get in? Right? Can I enroll at the pump? Can I enroll at the point of sale? Once I'm in, is there a reason for me to complete a profile? And from there, what do I get by joining? So now I gave something away for you to be in the program, but then what's the value of being in the program? Are there offers in the stores? And then as I'm beginning to purchase stuff, I build a profile around that person, and now I could start to communicate, and I can message, I can give offers, I can see what happens, I can build segments where if somebody lapses, then I know I tangibly got them back because I did X and Y was the result. And you take in recent times where we had so much volatility with fuel, the collaboration with loyalty and the fuel team is an amazing art, because you had retails going up extremely fast, at least at the time of this recording going down a little bit, but a little bit shaky. In that case, your street price sign can carry less weight based on what the fuel penetration is of that site. So how do I want to dispatch offers? What do I want my loyalty versus my non-loyalty price to be? And that can keep you from getting into a price war with your competitors. So it covers fuel, it covers merchandise. The industry stats are people spend 18 to 30% more. I see more in that with brands that are heavy on tobacco. But the real art of the loyalty program, it's not, the app is important and the app matters, but it's really that customer data that you're receiving, and then how you're messaging that customer to motivate certain behaviors.
So much more to unpack there. I think that almost every one of the brands we serve today has a loyalty program or is working on it for this year. And I'm wondering, from brands that have just started a loyalty program, are there easy wins that they can implement to get to a ROI faster? Are there examples of things to do that, in your opinion, are just low-hanging fruits after building a loyalty program?
I think it's very dependent on, is it unbranded? Is it branded fuel? Let's just touch upon branded for a minute. It's Friday, and if you're operating a BP station and you're an Amazon Prime member, you're getting 20 cents off a gallon. If I'm a BP operator, that's a significant part of my strategy. So am I working with the BP rewards, or am I working in silo to it? Advantages either way. But how you work with or compete against your major oil program is probably one of the biggest pieces to it. And then if you're unbranded, you certainly have more freedoms in deciding what you want to do with it. That could be an advantage or a disadvantage. But all in all, I think, you launch the program. Why do you get somebody in it? And if you're going to have a welcome offer to get people into it, then have the grit to keep them, because otherwise you just gave away margin to build membership on it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that kind of goes back to the expertise that the execution team has. Do you feel like most emerging teams and brands that are now implementing loyalty for the first time in 2026 have the expertise to understand, how do I segment my customer? How do I make the most out of my loyalty data that they're starting to collect for the first time? And if you're sort of someone like that and executing for the first time, what would your advice be to those types of brands?
Sure. I mean, many brands have amazing expertise in that and are doing an incredible job. And you could watch that by just, say, the publicly traded data that's available. So you look at the penetration rate of, say, Casey's, that discloses they're well over 40% in their program. And because Casey's is so rich in their food service program, they reported last that they have a 58% margin on food. They don't have to give away the house to get people into it, but they have an art that their program really works as a food brand complemented with fuel. And it's beautiful. Look at their share price for years. Absolutely on fire. So I think those are things that you can watch because it's the publicly traded data that's available versus, I'm not going to call out anyone that has reverse results on that, but you could see it if you just look to some of their competitors that are in the markets. So like my team and I spend a lot of time on this with brands because you choose a loyalty provider, and we have great providers in our industry. And sometimes I even see brands switching from one brand versus another. Sometimes that'll be lateral technology. Sometimes I'll see people really stepping down in technology. And in that case, I think it's a dependence of saying, well, it's strategy there versus the tool, or the loyalty provider broke their relationship with the retailer so bad that they're willing to go through the grit and the complexity of changing providers. So I think I see providers changing more often than not when really it's strategy or relationship that's broken there, not necessarily because maybe the monthly software cost was a little bit lower.
Got it. Okay, that's a good point. I think just double clicking on cost on a different thread here. You've spoken at multiple industry trade shows, CRU, for example. You've spoken about how brands like Chime and other banking apps are quietly becoming a loyalty layer, and it's an added cost. And can you break down your thesis there? Can you talk a little bit more about what are the risks and things that consumers and also brands should be aware of?
Sure. So we need to be aware of modern banking platforms because if you're not a part of them, you're potentially not even a part of the conversation of will someone fuel there. If you look at Chime, Chime's now the largest digital bank in the United States. And I believe last time they reported about 25 million users. So that's a good clip of America. You consider we're at about 350 million people. So in Chime, their target focus is the underbanked as well as the family household income of $100,000 or less. And the perks that they give to that group is greater in many cases than a traditional bank because they don't have all the brick and mortar cost to it. So you look at Chime in a couple different ways, and there's other brands as well, but they're the largest. As a C-store, you can be a place where people can do deposits with Chime. So think about that as what replaced money orders at one point in time. But then also, Chime's starting to do offers, not just with fuel, but also QSR and other pieces. And the way that works is I can open up my Chime app right now. There's gas stations around me where there's a discount of, say, 20 cents a gallon. I choose it. And now when I go to that gas station, for me to get that discount, I have to pay with my Chime Visa. So that's a fully closed network to say that, well, if I'm banking with Chime and I'm getting a fuel reward with Chime and I have to pay with Chime, that's a different level of loyalty than what you have within your own brand. And you could find ways to say, well, how do I transition them over? But realistically, that's something to say I need to decide if I want to work alongside of that or if I don't want to be a part of the conversation.
Do you feel like that often is, do I build this type of an experience versus my own loyalty experience, or is this something you could build in parallel with an existing loyalty experience you might have?
I think you have to do both, and I think it's going to keep getting more and more complex, and it's stuff that you have to watch. I mean, Jamie Dimon, CEO of Chase Bank, he talked about the threat of Chime. So if he's noticing it running, at least America's largest bank, I don't know if it's the largest in the world, then that's something that you have to pay attention to. We've seen it in other forms too. Like you have C-stores out there that are accepting Bitcoin for payments. It's a smaller segment today because we don't use Bitcoin as payment. It's more so in other countries where you have a lot of currency deflation. But I think you need to pay attention and you need to decide, do you want to be a part of it or not? It's similar to, most are aware of upside, right? Pros and cons of it, but you can't ignore it. You just have to say, does it make sense for my brand or a part of my brand or does it not? And if it doesn't, then you still need to monitor it to see if your competitors are a part of it.
Mm-hmm. And, as things become more complex, one thing I know we've spoken about in the past is the actual payments layer. And as you think about the P&L of a retail brand, the biggest costs in OPEX are team members, the labor cost, but also what you're paying for from a processing standpoint. What are the right questions that operators should be asking about here, like related to processing, and how do you continue to decrease processing cost and optimize specifically that lever on your P&L?
I think this is an area where we pay attention to what will be the disruptors in digital payments. So the answer to that isn't Chime, because you're paying with a Chime Visa, so your interchange is likely lateral. But society is going more and more cashless. Eventually, at some state in the future, what will be cash will be digital. So I think we can all agree with that. And I want lower processing fees for the industry as much as anyone. It's the largest cost center on the P&L next to labor and cost of goods. So I totally got that. But if you unpack the complexity of processing, say, Visa or MasterCard on the open loop networks, Visa or MasterCard is taking a royalty. The issuing bank is taking a royalty. The bank where you're making the deposit is taking a royalty. And the card processor is taking a royalty. That's quite a web, and a very large web. And I don't know how you unpack that in saying, well, just accept less of a fee, please, to all these parties. You could argue that on a closed loop, like, say, American Express, but can you negotiate a better deal with American Express, or do you decide just not to take it? The disruptor, the real answer here, I believe, is going to be what is the disruptor in payments, not the strategy that Chime did, but look, Chime developed something and into a huge user base, which is now driving behavior in a different way. So ultimately, will there be a digital payments disruptor that changes how we use Visa and MasterCard today? China many years ago said that they don't want to be dependent on Visa, MasterCard, and then that went to Alipay and WeChat. I think we'll just have to wait and see what that is. But I want Visa MasterCard fees to be lower for everybody as much as every retailer. I just, I struggle with seeing a dynamic change happening there.
Yeah, I think you're right. If you unpacked, if something like a Visa and MasterCard fee, as you said, you'll see in that layering, there's a lot of providers that are essentially profiting. And it's not just this is all of Visa's profit, which in fact may be much lower if you look at the current interchange on a specific type of transaction in this space. Um, Humans are going cashless. I fully agree. I can't remember the last time I used cash. Wow. 10 years from now, Peter, uh, say it's 2036. What does the shopping experience look like in a top of the line C store?
In the top of the line C store, I think experience matters. And that's ultimately what retail is evolving into today, right? Um, in every different format. Go shopping at the mall today, and it's not the same as it was before you could order stuff online, right? There's less staff, there's less sizes. It's just not the same experience. So ultimately, there's the convenience of, well, I'm going to need fuel, whatever that fuel may be. But do I go to a certain location because of the experience of the atmosphere? Um, you could say potentially the people, or the fact that there's self checkout and I don't have to talk to anyone. A quality food offer. So experience will matter more and more in retail that survives as society, moves more towards e-commerce.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Peter, it's time for our favorite part of the show, lightning round questions. I want to pass the mic to my colleague Matt here, who has 4 questions for you that we're going to ask, and feel free to give a quick answer and share what you think.
Yes, I'm always excited for this segment of the show, Peter. This first one here is a bit provocative, so apologies if this puts you on the spot. But let's say you're on a mission to get some really good prepared food from a C store. Are you going to Wawa or Sheetz for better food, and why?
I love them both, but I think today I lean more towards a brand like a Parker's Kitchen. When you're
Okay,
a fried chicken from raw, have those pure whole quality ingredients. Uh, that's a differentiator today. Kind of like how you see in the QSR space, Raising Cane's became number 2 to Chick-fil-A. I think
yeah,
people want higher quality food today, and they're willing to pay for it.
I love that. You pulled the wild card out there. That's good. What's one thing that you see most loyalty programs waste money on?
Probably overspending on aspects of it that aren't as measurable as messaging.
Nice. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um, is there a C-store brand outside of the top 20 you think everyone should be watching right now?
I still have my eye and curiosity on OXXO. Their global footprint, primarily in Latin America and Mexico, the power of what they've developed. They've got a small footprint in America at this point in time, but that's a sleeping giant that could um, make an incredible impact. So we'll have to see what they do with their U.S. strategy over time.
Is there something specific they're doing that is really interesting, or you think um, retailers in the U.S. could learn from?
Sure. Well, we talked a lot about digital payments, right? OXXO in Mexico is a bank. Their spin program, that's payment, that's paying bills, that's I need cash and I can get it off of spin, and that comes from the register in the store. I mean, they're a convenience store and a bank combined, but they're not classified as a bank. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool. I didn't know that. Final question for you, Peter. This is a fill in the blank. The future of convenience retail is blank.
The future of convenience retail is the brands that win are going to be the brands that, beyond filling the commodity need of fuel, are a crave-worthy part of my experience. I want to go to this C-store because the coffee is incredible, because I can grab it on the go if I order ahead, and order ahead is simple because it has different items. It's a place that I want to be and I want to shop. It's that I have an experience along with fulfilling the commodity of fuel.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. That sounds great. And I think that concludes our lightning round. So I appreciate your awesome responses there, Peter. I'll pass the mic back to Audit for any final questions or comments to close us out.
I thank you for joining us on Commerce Corner Season 2, Peter. It's great to have you, to learn from your incredible experiences. And I'm sure this is one of many conversations we're going to have. So thanks for coming on board.
Thanks so much for having me today. Had a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Of course, yes. Thank you again, Peter, and thank you to everyone who's tuning in today. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. We're available wherever you stream podcasts, and we've got new episodes coming out every few weeks, so you don't want to miss us on the next one coming soon. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks again.